The first encounter, the twin moons of Rathvera hung low in the night sky, their pale light dripping through the tall black trees. The forest was quiet, too quiet. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Somewhere in the shadows, a predator was watching. Kayla moved like a shadow herself, her bare feet silent on the moss. Her long bow rested in her hand, an arrow ready on the string. She was the best huntress of her clan, her eyes sharp enough to see a moth's wings in the dark. But tonight was different. The tracks she had been following were strange, too large for any animal she knew, and the footprints were heavy, pressing deep into the ground. She knelt by one and frowned. The shape was wrong, 5 toes, long stride, and boots? Only one kind of creature wore boots, a human. Her people feared humans. They were fast, clever, and always carried strange tools that could kill from far away. But this was her hunting ground. If a human had come here, she would drive him out. The sound of a twig snapping made her spin. Her bow lifted, the string pulled back. She saw him, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing dark armor that glimmered under the moonlight. He stood in the middle of the path, not hiding, not afraid. The pale light caught his face, strange pale skin, sharp eyes, a thin scar along his jaw. Kayla didn't hesitate. The arrow flew from her bow with deadly speed, but it never reached him. It stopped in the air, like an insect frozen in amber. The shaft trembled for a second, spinning slowly. Kayla's mouth went dry. The human lifted his hand, and the arrow floated down into his palm. He looked at it, almost curious, then looked at her. His voice was calm, deep. "You missed." Kayla's heart pounded. This was impossible. No one could stop an arrow in flight, not even the strongest warrior of her people. She felt the muscles in her arms tense as she reached for another arrow. The human raised his other hand slowly. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said. The wind whispered through the trees, but Kayla didn't lower her bow. "Why are you here?" she asked. Her voice was cold. The human gave a small smile. "Looking for someone who can help me." "Help you?" she said. Her eyes scanned the shadows. Was he alone? "You walk into my hunting ground and you ask for help? You're fast," he said, ignoring her tone, "and your aim is good. But your people have bigger problems than me." Kayla's eyes narrowed. She didn't like the way he spoke, as if he knew things she didn't. "This is Rathvera human," she said. "We can deal with our problems." He took a step forward. The light shifted, showing the strange device on his wrist, glowing faint blue. "I'm sure you can," he said, "but not with what's coming." Kayla's grip on her bow tightened. She didn't know if he was a threat or a madman. But one thing was certain. No outsider had ever stood in her forest like this. No outsider had ever stopped her arrow. The silence between them grew heavy. The forest around seemed to lean in, listening. Kayla's mind raced. She could end this now, put an arrow through his throat. But something in his eyes stopped her. They weren't the eyes of a man who feared death. They were the eyes of someone who had seen it too many times before. "What's coming?" she asked at last. The human tilted his head slightly, as if deciding how much to say. "You'll see," he said, "soon." Then, without warning, he tossed the arrow back to her. She caught it easily. But when she looked up, he was already turning away, walking down the path, deeper into the forest, not running, not looking back, as if he knew she would follow. Kayla stood frozen for a moment. Every instinct told her to let him go, to return to her village. But another voice whispered, if she didn't find out who he was, and what he meant, she would regret it. She slipped the arrow back into her quiver and followed high above. The twin moons watched in silence. The night was no longer quiet. The hunt had begun. A dangerous custom. The path twisted through the forest like a dark river. Kayla kept her distance as she followed the human, her steps silent, her eyes fixed on his back. He didn't walk like a man lost. He moved with purpose, as if he already knew the way. That bothered her. No outsider should be able to walk this deep into Rathvera's hunting grounds without a guide. They came to a clearing where moonlight spilled like silver over the grass. The human stopped and finally turned to face her. "You followed me," he said. Kayla tightened her grip on her bow. "You didn't answer my question," she replied. "What is coming?" Before he could answer, the sharp sound of a horn cut through the night. Kayla's head snapped toward the trees. The call was from her village, urgent and angry. A moment later, shadows moved between the trunks. Warriors of her clan stepped into the clearing, their eyes hard, their spears ready. The leader, an older warrior named Drak, looked from Kayla to the human. "You have brought him here?" he demanded. Kayla shook her head. "He came on his own." "That is worse," Drak growled. He stepped forward, his spear tip inches from the human's chest. "Human, you trespass on sacred land. Our law says your life is forfeit." Human's eyes did not flinch. "Your law is interesting," he said calmly, "but I've already spared one of your warriors tonight." He glanced at Kayla. "She aimed to kill me. I let her live." Drak froze. The other warriors exchanged uneasy looks. They all knew what that meant. Kayla felt the blood drain from her face. The law of honor was clear. If a warrior spared you in battle, you owed them a life debt. But if that sparing was done in front of witnesses, the bond was sealed in the eyes of the clan. And if the one spared was unmarried, the bond was not just life debt, it was marriage. The words came like stone in her mouth. "You're claiming the right of bond," she said quietly. The human shrugged. "I'm just stating what happened." Drak's eyes narrowed. "This is the law of our ancestors," he said. "If you challenge and are defeated, and the victor spares your life, you are bound to them. You will wed him." Kayla's fingers tightened on her bow until her knuckles hurt. She wanted to protest, to say this was a trick. But the elders had arrived now, drawn by the horn. Their faces were unreadable as they listened to Drak's account. The human stood still, letting them speak. Finally, the oldest among them, Elder Sava, stepped forward. "It is the way," she said. "The bond is sealed." Kayla's voice cracked with anger. "This is no warriors victory. This is some trick of the humans. He stopped my arrow with nothing." The human smiled faintly. "Not nothing," he said, tapping the device on his wrist. "Technology." But Elder Sova shook her head. "Skill or trick, strength or magic, it makes no difference. The law is clear." The warriors began to murmur, some amused, some shocked. A few young hunters laughed under their breath. Kayla felt heat rise in her chest, not from shame alone, but from the way they looked at her now, as if she were already his. She stepped forward, standing close to the human so only he could hear her words. "This changes nothing," she hissed. "I will find a way to break this bond. I will prove you are unworthy." He looked down at her, his eyes calm but not mocking. "I'm not here to chain you," he said softly. "I'm here because your world is in danger. You can hate me if you want, but you'll still need me." Her jaw tightened. She turned away from him, walking toward the village with the elders. The human followed at a distance. The law of honor had bound them. But in Kayla's mind, the battle was far from over. As they entered the village, the firelight painted the wooden walls in gold and shadow. Children peeked from doorways, whispering about the stranger. The air was thick with curiosity and gossip. Kayla felt every pair of eyes on her. Some pitied her, some envied her. All waited to see what would happen next. That night, she lay awake. In her hut, the image of the arrow frozen in the air would not leave her mind. She told herself it was just a trick, a machine she could outsmart. But deep inside, a small voice whispered that it was more than that. And she hated that the voice made her wonder, outside, under the twin moons. The human sat by the central fire. His eyes watched the forest, not the people, as if he was waiting for something to come out of the dark. The morning sun crept slowly over the high cliffs, spilling light across the village, turning the dew on the rooftops into silver drops. Kayla rose early, her mind already sharp with purpose. She had not forgotten the humiliation of last night. The whispers, the way the elders had spoken, as if her life was no longer her own. Today she would begin to prove that this human was not worthy of the bond the law had forced upon them. The human was already awake, standing near the central fire, with a small metal cup in his hand. Steam curled from it. He noticed her approach and gave a short nod. She did not return it. Instead, she called out to the warriors gathered nearby, her voice carrying across the square. "If this man claims to be a warrior, let him prove it. Our ways demand trials." A ripple of interest moved through the crowd. Some were eager for entertainment, others curious to see if the human's strange tricks could survive the tests of Rath Vera. Elder Sava appeared again, leaning on her staff, her eyes studying both Kayla and the human. "It is fair," she said. "3 trials will be held. If he fails, the bond is broken." Kayla met the human's eyes for the first time without anger, her voice steady. "Do you agree?" He took a slow sip from his cup, then nodded. "Name them." The first trial began almost at once, a test of speed through the forest paths. Kayla knew every twist and route, every hidden gap that could shave seconds off the run. The human would be forced to rely only on his eyes and his legs. When the signal horn sounded, they ran. Kayla darted ahead, weaving between trees, leaping over streams. She could hear him behind her at first, his steps heavy but steady. Then the sound grew fainter. She smiled to herself, thinking the race was already won. But when she burst into the final clearing, she found him waiting, leaning against the marker stone, his breath heavy but his face calm. "You took the long route," he said. "I found another way." He pointed to a high ridge where the rocks formed a narrow bridge over the stream. Kayla's chest burned, not from the run, but from the sting of seeing him win with cleverness instead of speed. The second trial was strength. The warriors brought out the great lifting stone, smooth from generations of hands. Few could raise it to their shoulders. Kayla had trained for years until she could hold it high. She stepped forward first, bent her knees, gripped the stone, and with a cry, lifted it until it rested across her back. The crowd roared. She set it down with a thud and stepped aside. The human studied the stone, then crouched down and wrapped his arms around it. His muscles strained, and slowly he stood, the stone rising higher and higher until it was above his head. The crowd gasped. Kayla's jaw clenched. She told herself it was nothing but human muscle and stubbornness. Yet she could not deny the raw power in that moment. The third trial was meant to end this. It was the trial of courage, a test before the flame pit. Each challenger must step to the very edge of the fire pit and stand without flinching while heated embers burst upward. Kayla knew most would step back. The instinct to protect one's flesh was too strong. She took her place first, staring into the swirling heat. The blast came, sparks kissing her arms. She did not move. When she stepped away, the warriors nodded with approval. The human took his turn, stepping close to the edge. The air rippled with heat. His eyes did not leave the flames when the burst came. It was stronger than the one Kayla faced, but he did not move back. In fact, he leaned forward slightly, as if studying the fire itself. When it ended, he stepped back with the same calm he had shown since arriving. The trials were over. He had passed them all. The murmurs of the crowd were no longer mocking, but filled with something else, something heavier, respect. Kayla felt it too, though she refused to admit it even to herself. She had wanted to humiliate him, to show he was unworthy. Instead, she had given him a stage to win her people's favor. That night, as the fires burned low, she saw him sitting alone again, eyes fixed on the dark forest beyond the village. She wondered if he was thinking about the trials, but then she noticed his hand resting lightly on the device at his wrist, as if ready for something. The thought returned to her, the one she had pushed aside since the first night. Maybe he truly was here for something far greater than her pride, and maybe whatever it was getting closer. The air had changed. Kayla felt it before she saw anything. A weight in the wind, a scent that didn't belong to the forest. It carried a faint metallic tang. Sharp enough to make the back of her throat tighten, she stood. Outside her hut, watching the shadows between the trees shift in ways they shouldn't. The human was already awake, as if he had been waiting for this moment. He came toward her with long, urgent strides. No trace of his usual calm. "It's started," he said. Kayla frowned. "What started?" He glanced toward the tree line, his eyes scanning as if measuring the distance to something only he could see. "The reason I came here." Before she could question him, a deep sound rolled through the forest. Not thunder, not any animal she knew. It was a heavy, layered vibration, like the slow beat of a giant's heart. The ground under her feet trembled. The elders emerged from their huts, muttering prayers. The children clung to their mothers. From the far side of the clearing, hunters returned early from their watch, their faces pale. They carried no game. Only broken branches and the smell of burned wood clinging to their clothes. "Trees are scorched," one said. "Not by lightning," another added, holding up a piece of bark blackened and crumbling. "And no sound of birds, not even insects." The human stepped forward, took the charred bark, and crushed it between his fingers. "Vorak," he said quietly. Kayla had never heard the word before, but it made her uneasy. "What is that?" she asked. He looked at her with an expression that made her feel colder than the wind. "A swarm that eats worlds." The warriors laughed nervously. "But it was forced." Drak spat on the ground. "More human lies. You come here with stories to make us fear you." The human didn't respond to the insult. Instead, he activated the device on his wrist. A small image flickered into the air. A shimmering projection of long, spindly creatures with razor limbs and eyes that burned like molten stone. They moved as one, devouring trees, animals, buildings, until nothing was left but ash and dust. The villagers stared in silence. Kala's stomach twisted. The creatures looked nothing like anything from Rath Vera, yet the burning scars in the forest matched what she saw in the projection. "They move fast," the human said. "Once they find a food source, they strip it bare. They're drawn to heat, movement, life itself, and they are close." The elders began to argue, some saying they should prepare, others claiming it was a trick to control them. Kayla felt torn. Her pride told her not to trust him, but her instincts, the same instincts that kept her alive in the forest, whispered that he was telling the truth. That night, a patrol did not return. The only sign of them was a single spear found at the edge of the eastern ridge. The wood blackened, the tip melted into a dull lump of metal. No predator on Rath Vera could do that. The human found Kayla near the fire and spoke in a low voice. "Your trials proved I can survive your games. Now you have to decide if your people can survive what's coming." She didn't answer. She watched the flames instead, but her mind was on the silence in the forest, the missing hunters, the way the air itself seemed to be holding its breath. Somewhere out there, something was moving closer, and she had the sinking feeling that once it arrived, no law, no trial, no honor would matter, only survival. The first light of dawn never touched the village. Instead, a thick, rolling mist crept in from the forest, cold and heavy, swallowing the shapes of huts and trees. Kayla woke to the sound of shouting, the deep blare of the warning horn cutting through the fog. She grabbed her bow and rushed outside, her breath clouding in the icy air. Shapes moved in the mist. At first she thought they were men, but then she saw the way they crawled low, too many limbs, moving in jerks and lunges, their bodies thin and jointed like the branches of dead trees. The human was already in the square, shouting orders in a language her people didn't know, his wrist device glowing brighter than she had ever seen. A scream tore through the air from the east watchtower. Kayla turned in time to see the shape of a Vorak climb the outer wall, its claws slicing into the wood like soft clay. Its eyes glowed faint orange, and each step left behind smoking scorch marks. The wall guard loosed a spear. It snapped in two against the creature's armored hide. "Get them off the walls!" The human's voice rang out. He raised his arm, and the device fired a crackling beam of pale blue light, striking the Vorak in the chest. The creature shrieked, twisting before falling back into the mist. Kala's heart pounded. The sound was not like any animal's cry. It was sharper, colder, almost mechanical. Warriors formed lines, their spears braced, the mist rippling as more shapes moved within it. Kala climbed the nearest roof for a better view, loosing arrows into the movement below. Each time she struck one of the Vorak in the head or joints, they stumbled, but many kept coming, ignoring wounds that would kill any living thing. A sudden crash from the western gate made her spin. 3 Vorak burst through together, their legs slicing the gate's beams like straw. Villagers screamed, scattering toward the center. The human met them head-on, his strange weapon pulsing with blue light in rapid bursts. 1 Vorak collapsed, twitching, another staggered, but the third leaped over him, claws outstretched toward a fleeing child. Kala didn't think. She leapt from the roof, hitting the ground in a roll, drawing and firing before she stood. Her arrow struck the creature in the neck joint. It hissed, turning toward her. Then a flash of blue light hit it in the same spot, and it fell, still smoking. She looked over and saw the human standing there, eyes locked on hers, not with mockery this time, but with something like approval. The battle became chaos. Vorak pouring through breaches in the walls, warriors and villagers fighting side by side. Kala and the human moved through the smoke and fog like 2 halves of the same blade, her arrows cutting down those in the distance, his weapon blasting apart those too close. At one point, a Vorak lunged from the side, its claws aimed at the human's chest. Kala's arrow caught it mid-leap, pinning it to the wall. Moments later, he stepped in front of her, taking a blow from a creature's tail that would have broken her spine, blasting it apart before it could strike again. By the time the horn signaled retreat, the mist was lifting, the survivors dragging the wounded into the square. The ground was scorched in patches, Vorak bodies twisted and broken where they had fallen, but for everyone dead. Kala knew more were out there. She stood breathing hard, her bow still in her hand. The human walked over, his armor scorched and dented. "You fought well," he said simply. Kala didn't answer right away, her chest still tight from the fight. Finally, she met his eyes and said, "So did you." It was the first time her voice carried no challenge, no anger. Somewhere beyond the trees, the mist gathered again, as if the forest itself was holding back something worse. The human glanced toward it, then back at her. "This was only the first wave," he said, and for the first time since she'd met him, Kala believed him without question. Asterisk smoke still hung over the village, curling in the cold air like the last breath of the battle. The fires were dying, but the smell of scorched wood and metal clung to everything. Kala walked among the wounded, helping bind cuts, lifting fallen beams, speaking to those who had lost family. She had seen death before, but the Vorak left a different kind of silence, the kind that made even the birds and insects keep away. The human moved quietly through the same space, not seeking thanks, only checking defenses, repairing damage with tools none of her people understood. Some of the warriors avoided him, still unsure if he was the cause or the cure, but others nodded as he passed. Kala noticed it, the way respect had begun to replace suspicion, and she wasn't sure how she felt about that. Elder Sava called the survivors together at the central fire, her voice carrying through the heavy air. The Vorak came as the stranger warned. She said, "Without him, more of us would be dead. Honor demands we recognize this." There was a murmur of agreement, even from Drak, whose distrust had been as deep as Kala's. Then the elder's eyes turned to her. "Kala, the bond between you and the human was sealed by law. Now it is strengthened by blood shared in battle." Kala felt every gaze on her, the heat of it pressing against her skin. She thought of the trials, of his strange weapon burning through the mist, of the moment he had stepped between her and death without hesitation. The anger she had carried for him was still there, but it no longer burned the same way. The human stood a short distance away, not speaking, not pushing her to answer. He looked almost ready to walk away if she gave the word. That struck her more than any display of strength he could have claimed. Her by the law forced the bond to be about pride and victory. Instead, he seemed to be leaving the choice in her hands. When the council ended, she found him near the outer wall, examining the scorched marks where the Vorak had struck. "You could have let me die," she said. He didn't look at her right away. "I could have, yes. Why didn't you?" she asked. This time he turned, his eyes steady. "Because there's more at stake than your pride or my survival. Your people need you alive. Whether you trust me or not." Kayla studied him for a long moment, the sounds of the village behind her fading into the background. The bond they shared had started as a trap, an unwanted chain. Now it felt like something else, not softer, but sharper, like a blade forged in fire. She didn't give him the answer the elders wanted, not yet, but she did something she hadn't done before. She stood beside him at the wall, looking out at the forest, and when the mist shifted far in the distance, hinting at movement within, they both reached for their weapons at the same time, without a word. The night was colder than any Kayla could remember. Frost gathered on the edges of the huts, glittering under the pale light of the twin moons. The village fires burned low, and most of the people slept in uneasy silence. But Kayla stood at the kile edge of the outer wall, her bow resting against her shoulder. Her eyes fixed on the forest. The human was there too, sitting on one of the high watch beams, his strange weapon across his knees. For a long while, neither spoke. The only sound was the faint crackle of frost beneath their boots. Finally, Kayla broke the quiet. "You said the Vorak was only the first wave." He didn't answer right away, his gaze still scanning the shadows. Then he nodded. "They never come alone. The swarm is just the teeth. There's something else that drives them." Kayla frowned. "Something worse?" He gave a short, grim smile. "Something that chooses which worlds get eaten and which are left alone. And it's not here yet." She let the words settle like stones in her mind. The thought of more danger just beyond the horizon was both terrifying and strangely grounding. Her people had fought well, but the Vorak had pushed them to their limit. If something stronger was coming, they could not face it alone. The human reached into his pack and pulled out a small, battered device, no bigger than his palm. When he touched it, the air shimmered with light. A map of stars unfolded above them. Shifting and turning, Kayla's eyes widened. He pointed to one of the glowing marks. "That's here," then traced a path across the map to a cluster of stars she had never seen before. "That's where I came from. And that's where we might find the only ones who know how to stop what's coming." "You want me to leave Rathvira?" she asked. "I want you to survive it," he said, his tone even, but there was a weight behind it. "You're a fighter, but you've only fought for your people. Now you might have to fight for more than that." She looked out at the forest, its dark shape shifting gently under the wind. Somewhere out there, the mist was gathering again. But this time it didn't feel like it was hunting the village. It felt like it was waiting. Kayla turned back to him. "If I go, it's not because of your law or your bond," she said. His mouth twitched into the smallest smile. "Good." The first streak of dawn touched the horizon. The map of stars faded back into the cold air. And without saying more, they both stood side by side, watching the forest. Somewhere beyond those trees and beyond their world, the next chapter of the fight was waiting for them.